and then, yeah, it looks like it's in progress. Yeah.
Okay, great. It looks like Paula's coming in, but I can go ahead and just read the motion. I move that the items on the meeting agenda constitute essential business of this committee meeting electronically as necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans, considering the COVID-19 outbreak and any rule conflicting with governor's executive order permitting electronic meetings be suspended. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great. It looks like Paula's in, but I know we can hear you. But yeah, I can hand it back to you. No, you're good. I can do the roll call and then hand it back to you. Cool.
That sounds perfect.
All right. Abigail, can you start us or?
Do you want me to do the roll call?
Yeah.
Yes. Laura Bermudez.
I'm here and yes.
Elena Boyer.
Here and yes.
Alex Smith.
Here and yes.
April Calvin.
Present and yes.
And Paula Foster.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry, you guys. My computer this morning decided that it just wanted to be really slow waking up. So it took a minute or two to get it to do what it was supposed to do. Thank you for getting started. Before we go any further, I also would like to ask if there are any conflicts of interest that we need to state. If so, please do so now. I'll start. My wife is an ESG funded organization. Otherwise, no further. Anyone else?
Hi, this is April Calvin. I work for the Salvation Army and we receive ESG and COC funds.
All right. I think that's it. I don't think anyone else has any other conflicts, correct? Awesome. Well, since I am not currently looking at my agenda, I'm gonna ask Abigail, what's the first thing?
It's going over the Planning Council agenda.
That's what I thought. Hold on, let me see if I can. So I apologize, you guys. I had flooding in my basement and been trying to work on all of that stuff for the last week, and I haven't looked at my emails a whole lot, so I don't even see where
I have it ready and pulled up if you want me to share it.
Do that. That would be awesome.
Hey, Paul, if you could pass me the little ball so that I can share my screen. This is Abigail.
Yeah, okay. Go for it. All right, there we go. First part of the meeting is, as usual, we need a story of progress. Not story of progress. So we don't want to talk about how the hotel where we've been housing everyone has been flooded out. So, or do we?
I'm not laughing at the situation.
I
Just
know,
laughing
well,
at your tone.
You know, it's been that kind of week, April.
Yeah, it's been
I know
tough.
you. I know you have. You know.
I don't know if we want to talk about Hands on Nashville and, the community coming together to help her rebuild. Maybe that could be like a day, not a story of progress, but like another service day, because she's going to need some work out there. And she has insurance, but none that covers a flood. Not sure, I don't like all the politics and stuff that's going on, but not sure of if, because it was a drainage issue, big, large 4x4, maybe 6x6 drain in the middle of her parking lot that was overpowered. Not sure if that's something the city could help her with, because that's what caused the 5 feet of water to pool into the parking lot and 2 to 3 feet into the homes.
Wow.
So, yeah. the only thing that, anyways, I'm gonna get all emotional, so I'm gonna stop right there. We have some people
Right.
that are suffering out there. They they were moved there. They were just now settling down. It's been a lot of stuff going on, and they were just now settling down, and then all of a sudden they're ripped from their homes again. We had two individuals that just showed back up the next day after we helped them get relocated with Red Cross, relocated to another spot. They just went back to their home, flooded out and all, locked their doors, and said, "This is my home. I'm not leaving." So, we have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of emotions all over the place. So,
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe highlight Hands on Nashville and other agencies that typically, don't get into this homeless arena.
Maybe, or maybe we talk about our response to the flood and what we all as a community have done to try to, I don't know, to meet the needs of the folks that have been directly impacted. We have everyone in hotels at the moment in different places, people that were in the camps. The response, I think, from the nonprofits have been pretty incredible, including the response from Metro Social Services. I'll tell you that the decision was made to put folks in hotels, and the hotel was not necessarily happy to have them when they arrived, and it took a lot of cajoling on the part of Bonnie, Renee's assistant, to make it happen. You guys have no idea. I mean, we got the folks there, and the man wouldn't rent them the rooms because they smelled bad. But Bonnie came along. Bonnie came in person 2 or 3 times and just cajoled him into doing the right thing. So that's where our folks, most of the folks are at the Super 8, and that's where they've been. But it was a team effort across multiple nonprofits to be able to pull that off. So I don't know if we talk about something like that in terms of response to crisis, or if you want to go specifically around something else. I don't know. I would defer to you guys. So Laura and Elena, why don't you guys give us your opinion, because April and I have kind of been in the thick of it. I think we're a little jaded and a little tired. So what do you guys think we should do?
I don't know. I guess listening to you guys talk, I mean, I don't think we can't not talk about it. So, and I think our members want to hear for those of us who haven't been on the ground. And, I just want to take a minute and just thank all of you guys, because I'm at a national organization, so I don't do boots on the ground. So thank you. And I know it's hard and traumatic for you guys. So, I do think we should talk about it. If we can stay on the positive side of it, I think that would be good. Or, while it's not progress, is there, I guess I'm thinking like Homeless Persons Memorial, doing obituaries for the two, Fred and Melissa, or something like that to honor them. But that's all I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I'm with Elena as well. Thank you guys so much for everything y'all have been doing. I know it's been a week / a year. And as I'm listening, and I think about, story of progress, my question is there, are there moments or pieces of the response that we can highlight that shows where we've come as a community, how far we've come as a community, if that's the case, right? Had this happen 3 years ago, 5 years ago, would the response have been similar? Would the coordination have been similar? And if there's, a way to highlight the progress that we've made as a community, that serves us in these moments of, emergent need, that's a really great way to show the progress, even if it's not, people in homes per se.
So Judy and Abigail, could we potentially have Will Conley share some of the some of the perspective from Park Center, because Park Center has been right there with us as well in all of this, and maybe getting some input from, or have Will give us a story that would tie all of this in together. Would that be? Can we ask him to do that?
Definitely, we can ask him. Yes. Yeah.
Why don't we do that? I think we haven't actually heard from Park Center as part of what we're doing here, and I know Ashley and her team have been incredible in coordinating things as well. So let's see if Will would be willing to do that. If Will won't do it, then we'll circle back around and figure something else out. I'm sure between April and I, we can make something happen. All right. And would one of you reach out to him?
Yes.
Awesome. Sweet. Then our regular reports. Then we're going to have a report from Heather around kind of where we're at with American Rescue Plan.
Yeah, and I did want to ask Heather if you feel comfortable giving that report.
Yeah.
I've not asked you yet.
I mean, I can tell you what we know. There's still not a lot of detail, right? But I can give what is known, and what HUD is asking us to communicate to communities so far.
Do we have a plan for the folks at the hotel who were displaced that we had put there?
We're working on it literally daily, and working on it right after this meeting.
All right.
Quick question. Say a quick thank you. That's another piece on Friday afternoon where the entire community came together that has helped the people that were completely washed out in those 2 encampments to make sure that they could stay in motels over the weekend, to give us a little more time to work on some planning and long-term planning around that. A huge shout out to the community for that. That's another, I mean, it was really last minute and everybody pulled together again.
Right. Yeah, I think we have everybody covered until tomorrow. At this point, I think we're working on extending tonight, but I think
Yeah, I mean we're meeting with OEM later today to work on trying to extend those vouchers so we can not destabilize people again and put them back outside.
Okay. All right. Then we'll do strategic planning updates and then committee reports. And then what's next? Other business.
So Susie is having computer issues and asked me to make sure that we share that Urban Housing Solutions would like a little bit of time. They have a request that needs to be approved, and then Paula, for you to sign a letter approving their RAD conversion.
Okay, explain that to me a little bit more, or can you?
You guys
So,
hear that? Can you hear me? Okay.
yeah, there's Susie.
Okay, good. And if I'm in the middle of a sentence and all of a sudden I go away, that my computer is just completely frazzled. You guys can identify that. Brent Elrod, who's acting director, managing director, Urban Housing Solutions, sent me something a couple of weeks ago saying that he needed a letter signed by the COC, and because governance is sort of the COC, and Paula is chair of governance, it would be signed by her, and it is to approve their request to HUD for renovation of the SRO on Murfreesboro Road. They've been working hard with HUD, and ages ago, I don't know whether Brent presented to the Planning Council, but he certainly presented information and took questions from the general membership. It could have been 6 months ago. So he has presented that kind of information, and I sent along, I think, to most of you, but I keep forgetting that Laura and Alex are now on the on the executive committee. Be glad to send that again, but it is the kind of thing that unless they get this letter that says that the COC approves they're going forward with this RAD, which is Rental Assistance Demonstration Program conversion, they will not be able to kind of proceed doing that. And they are I'd have to look back at their letter and remember from Brent about what the details are. Be glad to send that letter along to you, or that email along to you all. It does have as an attachment the letter that you would like to have signed by Paula. And therefore, it's not, if Paula is going to be authorized to sign, the Planning Council needs to be the authority that does it.
That's correct. So can you explain to me exactly what it means that they're going to do this conversion from what to what? In a nutshell.
Actually, I can't. His email. Sorry.
That's
I meant
okay.
to do it this morning to be able to explain it to you all, and I did not.
Okay.
My sense is that they're going to renovate the property that they have there on Murfreesboro Road into larger units and fewer units. I mean, back in the day, it was 172 units of affordable housing and a very condensed population of poverty. I think they're trying to address that, and also sort of decentralize folks that have been housed there. So they're going to renovate, they're going to make the units larger, and they're going to use, I think, the inventory of some of their other housing to sort of backfill any units that may lost. They are. It is a one-to-one conversion, so no units will be lost, and they'll continue to have that homeless preference. But again, the details are in his email, and if we've got any questions, those are the kinds of things that maybe we could do some back and forth on. And he could for planning council meeting itself. So you guys are equipped with that you need.
All right, I think it's good to put that on the agenda and give them a few minutes to explain and request, and then the planning council can vote on that.
Hey, Susie, I haven't read their email because I'm a little behind myself, but it would be helpful if they would have numbers, like the number of units and what it's going to change to, and then the length of time that it may be down or going through renovations. My phone.
Okay, will do.
I can actually say a little bit about RAD conversion if y'all want me to.
Sure.
Please.
Give us a little.
So RAD conversion, it has to be a one-to-one. They have to relocate all the people that are going to be displaced. That's part of what they have, that they're required to do. Meaning, like, if they're going to renovate a property or redevelop a property, they have to house all the people that are currently living there, and they have the first right to come back to that redeveloped property. It basically allows them to access additional funds for ongoing redevelopment, and allows for more mixed income possibilities. So overall, it's a good thing as long as folks keep the homeless preference, which it sounds like they're doing.
Okay.
And I guess that's sort of a mini version in terms of RAD, what MDHA is doing in the all the renovations in Casey Homes is based on that sort of RAD concept.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You all have a preference of where you want that in your agenda?
Can we put it between Susie and the committee updates?
Do you want it before Heather then?
Yeah, before Heather, after Susie.
Yep.
And just adjust the times a little bit. Yeah, I'd say give them 5 minutes. And it would be an action item then, because it's a request for approval from the COC.
It also gives you all an opportunity to be a little bit of a watchdog as they do these redevelopments. So it's a new thing with these conversions, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
And I also think on that note that homelessness preference should be in a consideration, however you're gonna vote in favor of it, that you figure that in as you're in favor under some condition or whatever you want that to be, that condition.
Right. Awesome. Anything else on the agenda?
Just didn't know if there was any other committee reports. I assume we would like to have Kathy give one last one for the end of the winter shelter season. But I didn't know if there's anything else.
I have not received a lot of the committee reports. Even though I sent a reminder, I really got very few. The one I could think of is the Resource Development Committee, just to have an update on what they're working on. Or yeah, they have a meeting this week, so we can do a quick update there if you would like that.
If they have something they'd like to share, that's fine. If not, I don't want to just put it on there for the sake of putting it on there. So,
yeah, and I will not know actually until Thursday.
yeah, so it's fine. Just can we just leave it at committee reports and not necessarily put the specific committees? The reason that I'm saying that is that way we're not adding to the agenda once we've approved it, because committee reports are whatever committees we have to report. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. I think we started listing them because some of the planning council members requested it, but I think just given that we don't know for sure at this point in time.
I think it was trying to, but doesn't do a whole lot of good to list the committee report. I think if I remember correctly, the point behind that was so that we remembered all of the committees. But if all the committees are not going to be reporting every time, then it's kind of not necessary.
Sounds good.
All right. Just, Lord help me, I don't want to have somebody give a report that's not on the agenda and then get all twisted out of shape by somebody. All right. Anything else?
I'm just a little, I wanted to kind of take the pulse from a few of you. For the COC general membership is meeting much less than it used to. And it's been a while since it's met. The HUD Continuum of Care, there is not any particular news to share, but I think that the general membership would be really interested in having the committee chairs just brief the whole membership on what's going on within their committees. So we're thinking that we might have an April meeting and have those chairs that could attend just kind of update folks about what the heck they're up to. And it seemed to be, at the last chairs meeting, even the chairs were interested in what everyone else was doing. And it was just a really nice opportunity to kind of cross-fertilize a little bit. And I guess that's going to continue Friday.
I think that's I think we should definitely do that. In particular, I also think we need to be able to share with everyone what everyone's been doing in the last week in order to address the crisis that we've just had. I think it's important for it as a meeting so that we debrief, so to speak. So let's do it. I think that's a great idea.
The last thing I wanted to bring up, Paula and committee members, is that after our last meeting, Paula, when you asked about the virtual meetings, I did talk to Derek, and the current executive order is in place until the end of April. And he said to be prepared with backup in-person options. So just so that you all are aware, our next meeting will be at the beginning of May. So that potentially may be in person. And I'm working on trying to secure some different spaces that will be large enough to accommodate the Homelessness Planning Council and any guests that may arrive. And so just be aware that it is likely that that will come to an end at the end of April. We don't know for sure, but it seems less certain than it has been in the past.
All good things must come to an end, correct? So, yeah. Okay. All right.
Which I guess that's even more of a reason to go ahead and have a CLC general membership meeting this month. So that'll buy us some time coming into the new world, right?
Exactly.
Well,
and once the NOPA comes out, then those boring details get to be sort of the scene for the general membership meetings. And I think those other topics would be really interesting to cover in April anyway.
I do think the general membership has to meet in May, though, for voting on Homelessness Planning Council members. So if we are no longer allowed to do virtual meetings, then there will have to be an in-person vote.
Yay, raw. Can we require vaccines? don't even go there. Okay. What's next? Are we done? That's good. Short meeting.
Yep, I think the rest is the strategic plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking one thing before we started that.
Great.
I had something in my head to talk about before we do that. Now I can't remember what the hell it was. Oh, I do know what it was. So real quickly, I just want to acknowledge that there was an issue in a committee recently, and we are working on a solution to how to address that issue. It was, which committee was it, Elena?
Mine, data.
Yeah, it was yours. Yes, I know it was yours. Data, the data committee. There was one member who made some really awful comments around race, diversity issues. They were awful. So we are dealing with that. It got set back because of the flood last week, or we would have had it resolved. And it may be another few days before we're able to take it up, but we are going to take decisive action around what happened, and there'll be more of that later. Elena, you and I need to connect at some point in the very near future. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for following up on that.
I wish it would have been taken care of last week, but then that just didn't happen last week, of course, because of everything else. But I'd want you to know that it's not fallen off of the radar. It just had to be pushed back a little bit. But we'll take care of it before your committee meets again. So, which is when? Do you have another meeting scheduled?
Yeah, I think it's the 19th.
Okay. This will be resolved before your committee meets again. That is my commitment to you. So.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. Laura, take it away.
Okay. So just as a slight refresher, we started looking at the strategic plan executive committee items last time we were all together, and agreed that we probably needed a little more dedicated time to look through those items in more detail and just kind of hammer them out. So that's what we're doing today. I want to start in Abigail and April were on the strategic planning committee. So first of all, certainly jump in at any point in time, especially when it has to do with context and all that fun stuff, and fill in any gaps, because it's been a hot minute since we put this plan together. But I wanted to start kind of how we did with the committee, working on those big hairy goals, right? The BHAG, to give this whole group and just refresh everybody on the context, like why is it that there are certain action items of the plan and how do they all connect together? And then we can go through the detailed action items that are assigned to the executive committee. I think it'll make a little more sense for all of us. It certainly did for me as I went back to those 4 major goals and then looked at the action items. And then Judy and I did some work last week as well to just organize the action steps in a way that I think will tell a little bit more of a story as to what is each item and why is it assigned to us and what is it that we're supposed to do with it. So just for our conversation today, the objective will be to look at those items assigned to the executive committee and articulate each action step. So if there's something that we feel like this action step needs a little more detail, some more information, it doesn't make a lot of sense or what have you, we can go ahead and articulate that or re-articulate it or add information to that step. determine what actions are required to complete each of those steps, just really at a high level, so what's next to get this rolling, and then prioritize and determine timelines. So I just wanted to set that expectation because we won't have time today to, work on the action steps, but we will have time today to kind of figure out what are our next steps and what is the next year as it pertains to getting things done on the strategic plan look like for our committee. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, okay, cool. So this is more like a planning than a doing. And then, next time we get together, I'll crack the whip and we can get some stuff done. So like I mentioned, just to refresh everybody's memory, the strategic plan is our community plan to build a system to end homelessness, right? So this is about system within the community. And I think the events of last week, the events of the last year have really underscored how important it is to have people housed, right? Have people in homes. And that is what this plan is about. It is about making sure that homelessness, if it occurs, that it's short and it occurs once. And so, that is the basis of this plan. And as the committee talked about the issues that existed in the community and what we needed to do in order to achieve that goal, these were the 4 major areas that the committee identified as needing improvement to create the foundation that would allow us to have a systematic process within our community and a system within our community and homelessness. So the first goal is about resources. It's called Optimize All Resources, and it is truly focused on the fact that as we all talked and we did pulses and listening sessions, we realized we just didn't have a good grasp of what resources exist across the community, right? I think each nonprofit, each department, individuals know their resources in silo, but we don't have a clear view across the community, or at least that was the case at the time. Didn't have a clear view across the community of what was out there in Nashville. So that goal was intended to, number one, identify those resources. So we had that community view. Then second of all, optimize those resources. Identify the inventory, then expand on the inventory, which meant, not just, really looking beyond the resources and inventory that we had at the time or today, and looking for new opportunities to expand, and then finally maximize inventory. And that's really about, how do we leverage better by working together and leverage our scale to really do the most with what we have. So that was the first goal. And then there's some additional items on diversion and prevention programs, because what we heard from our community and from our stakeholders were, yeah, it's great to get people housed, but how do we keep them housed? And so the committee felt very strongly that there needed to be some focus on some of that additional, support programs, and that's kind of where it landed in the plan. So any questions or even any comments from others on goal number 1? So cut and dry. Goal number 2, improve data and collection and utilization, I believe is what it's supposed to be called. And this, of course, I think everybody knows, we are working toward being a much more data-driven community and system. We identified in, once again, in the listening sessions and just trying to gather information in order to build the strategic plan, that we didn't have a lot of data. Data exists in pockets. It wasn't very comprehensive. We were just starting to build out, our HMIS system, et cetera. So that was something that the committee felt very strongly should be its own goal in and of itself, because we truly want to become a community that is data driven, that is really making decisions based on good information. And in order to have good information, we need good data. So that is what this is all about. And I'm sure Elena, working on the data committee, could give us all kinds of background and context to what's going on in that space. But essentially, this is about, establishing better data sharing across the community, establishing that good system of information, and then starting to establish metrics, and then become more systematic and more, intentional about sharing that data across the organization. Once again, with the intent of making good decisions for the community based on real information, real data. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions here. Any
I have a couple of
Elena,
questions.
Pardon?
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I think with, I'm on the HMIS committee, so with a lot of new agencies, funded or unfunded, right, entering data in, I feel like between when we first did the strategic plan versus now, the plethora of data that's available has probably tripled. I think maybe sometimes in the past, we would say the data is not complete, the data is not, we have all these excuses on why, but I think maybe highlighting that more people are entering the data and that we have much more of a robust system, especially with the shared information and the new processes. The only other thought would be, I don't know if this belongs here or somewhere else, entering or figuring out a way to do a sync, because a lot of agencies have to enter data into their agency-wide system, and then that means they're entering the same data twice somewhere. So maybe syncing or bridging the data. I don't know if that's on your radar, Judy, not to give you something else to do, but.
So April, I will tell you right now that is probably something that can't happen, because all the systems that we all use are different and they don't talk to each other. So figuring out a way to make that happen is really, really, really difficult to do. So, and it's something that I think we all have concerns about, and it's each system is proprietary. Whatever data system you're using, HMIS is proprietary, and they don't talk to each other. So we're in a world of information at your fingertips, but integrating it all into one system is not an easy task.
It is not easy. It's very much on the radar. It's not something that's going to happen quickly or very soon. In the data collection, I also don't think we're ever going to have one, just this one system. So, but one, HMAS, we have made great strides. If when you see the monthly reports and also the newsletter, you can follow where we have made these strides as part of this plan, this strategic plan. There's also a lot of engagement, community engagement that actually falls to the executive committee on how to communicate that back out. And then HMS is a continuous effort to improve. So one of the next goals is really to work with the community to see and shift how to use HMS now that we can actually use it and share data safely. So it's unduplicate numbers and move towards that. It's how do we shift the mindset of how we use it correctly and learn that together. We're really doing a push on outdoor homelessness and shelter homelessness to make sure we enter data as a community correctly and in the most effective way. And then communication is always going on. How can we make sure we cut down some duplication of data? It's never going to be fully implemented. I believe there's not going to be ever one database for an entire community that covers everything everybody needs to do across everything, but HMS is actually that catch-all to help us that. So I also, we as a community, I still see that people think HMAS is the Homeless Impact Division's database. It's not. It's the community's database. It's your database. So that's kind of why all this communication around this is important. And I think the community has done a great job, especially with the additional dollars to improve.
And if you don't mind just me adding just a few thoughts, and I don't know if, just thinking over time from when we put this strategic plan together, to your point about are we using the HMIS data to the best use, one of the conversations we've been having or might be having in data committee is because it's also used as a prioritization for our housing, just kind of improving some measures. Obviously there's challenges to be eyes for that and those types of things too. So I'm wondering how can we fix some of those things? Is that appropriate for a strategic plan? Because the data committee has been having some challenges, I think, meeting some of these goals just because we didn't have a lot of data. We did a gaps analysis, but we're still relying, as the database is getting stronger and stronger, we still don't have the answers to do a comprehensive gaps analysis. So I'm just wondering what else we can build into this to help improve utility of the database. So just some thoughts around that. And one of the things that, and maybe it's just for my world, but as we look at prioritization for housing, just improving some of our health measures that are in HMIS might be helpful in that prioritization ranking. Also acknowledging those are really hard to get to, so.
So this is all really great conversation, and you guys almost have made some of my points for me. And so these are the conversations we need to have within the executive committee. When we look at the executive committee items, when we get down to those, they are truly governance and coordination items, right? As we as a committee looked at this plan and the action items in this plan back, in 2018, 2019, the items that we said, gosh, we really need a body that can help us define governance, help us better coordinate across the different committees, across the community. It was determined that the executive committee was probably the best committee for that. So the questions that you guys are bringing up are the questions that hopefully we can address in either some of these action items or, just as a continual look at the strategic plan, because that was the intention of the work that we're doing, is to keep an eye on the strategic plan, identify opportunities for when people should be talking, when issues are bubbling up that we're learning about as we're moving through this process, and then, be the group or the body that can help make those connections and help drive work forward. So I've made a couple notes on what Elena and April have brought up to either bring back in our conversation today or for us to continue talking about and determining, what are the next steps. Because I think you guys are talking about the progress that we're making on the strategic plan. And what we can do as a committee is make those connections and make sure that that progress continues and facilitate the continuation of that progress. And to that point, what I wanted to call out here, not to beleaguer this because we'll get to these steps later, as you can see, the 2 steps that are assigned in the data goal to the Planning Council are really around visualizing progress and bringing forward the importance of the data and the information that we have as a community. So when we get to these action steps, what we'll be talking about is, how do we visualize that, right? How do we have quarterly reports that start telling a story for the community, for the council, for our broader public and community, so that we can be, connecting, telling our story, and making informed decisions. So moving on, we have goal number 3, and this goal kind of gets to, everything that the executive committee is kind of tasked to do, but also it really gets to the fundamentals and the foundation of this plan, which is collaboration. So goal number 3 is truly about enhancing and expanding formal collaboration. As a strategic planning committee, what we identified was we have a lot of relationships, which is fantastic, right? This is a community with a lot of, long-standing relationships and history, and that's how we, at least at the time of the plan, were operating, based on, well, you and I know each other because we work together, and we have a relationship, and we can kind of connect and talk and collaborate. But we didn't necessarily have, formal mechanisms that allowed for more collaboration, more comprehensive collaboration across the community, right? So instead of people working in their little pockets or bubbles, really facilitating a way for the community to really come together. So that's what you see in goal 3. I mean, it's truly a governance and collaboration focused goal. So really making sure that our committees have a clear goal and a clear action items to be working on, that they have a way to kind of talk to each other, and then that the different partners in the organization have opportunities for collaboration, communication, et cetera. So that's really what you see. Governance of the committees, increased formal collaboration among our existing partner agencies and individuals and stakeholders. And then finally, long-term, building ways for us to engage new partners to be part of the broader community focus on our efforts here. Questions or comments about this goal? Okay. And then the final goal is, developing commitment through engagement. And this is truly about, goals 1, 2, and 3. There is a little bit of that outside focus, but those are truly about, getting our house in order, right, as a community, making sure that we all have the information and the mechanisms that we need to work as effectively as possible to end homelessness. Goal number 4 is really stepping outside to the broader community, to the public, in addition, of course, to the community that is already engaged, through more effective, more proactive and intentional communication and engagement, right? That's another thing that we had identified as a strategic planning committee. We've got a really fantastic group of people who are passionate engaged, have a long tenure in focusing on homelessness, supporting homelessness, doing all the really great work. And it can be an insular community. So how do we broaden outside of that? How do we bring in more of our Nashville neighbors and stakeholders into the conversation, right? So it's not always the same small group trying to push that boulder up the hill. And so that is the focus of goal number 4 is, how do we start telling the story in a way that resonates with those people that we want to reach outside of, the community that exists today or the community that, has historically worked together. And how do we, continue to engage our community as well through education, through storytelling, and then, through celebration. So that's, those are the 4 goals. I'll stop for questions or comments either on goal 4 or on those broader, 4 goals together.
I'll say something a little bit about, collaboration and communication and strategy. I think sometimes, we're all on the same goal of housing people, but sometimes it may look different in the public eye or when politics come into play. It may need to be, I never like backdoor kind of conversations, or, because it's always something that's said backdoor that it looks a little different when it's brought to the public. So maybe having more, I don't want to call them a town hall, but more open conversations about where we're going as a community. How do we all stand as a united front for finding more safe and affordable housing opportunities. I get a lot of, and you probably have heard this from many years ago, and now it's like resurfacing. A lot of philanthropy people in our, or in our community are used to say, you guys don't have your act together, so I don't want to put money into that, right? And then it kind of went away because there's this big momentum. Maybe we didn't need their money, I don't know, because, CARES Act and all of that. Well, now that we're circling back around, it's kind of the same thing. The community doesn't have one voice or one common goal. And they just don't know where to stand in that. So maybe having town halls or, like last spring or the spring before last, we had those national think tanks come to town to kind of show us different ways of doing things. Like how do we build a more robust system? No one is ever going to think the same. Agencies and their missions and visions and strategies are always going to be a little bit different. But how does it appear to the community? And how do we get more dollars in this sector or housing opportunities in this sector so that we can move forward?
Yes, April, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly, I think what we need to figure out, right? How do we manage all these moving parts and these, different goals, kind of different missions that ultimately are part of the same mission? And how do we help everybody, who's involved within the COC be able to tell that common story, be able to communicate in a way that feels cohesive so that we can bring in the broader community and create that broader engagement, because we need it, right? We need it for funding, just like April, you mentioned. I think Judy and I talked about Jimmy's comments from the Strategic Planning Council, right, where, he, on multiple occasions, I see you smiling, Susie, talked about, hey, you know, you can't come to me and ask me for money without, you know, information, without showing me that my money or my donation or my, you know, investment is going towards something, right? So, you know, we heard that loud and clear, and I think that was part of the development of this goal. And then, I mean, the other, there was another piece here that I like totally lost my train of thought. Just thinking about Jimmy.
While you're waiting to regain those thoughts, I'll say that was a very teachable moment for Jimmy, right? Because he wanted to be involved and he wanted to be all guns a-blazing for us. And then he's like, I don't really like the way this is going, you know, whether our goals were too soft or our, you know, in the for-profit world, it's a lot different. The language is totally different. So he talks about that to this day. He's like, how's it going? Like he wants the momentum. And I was like, well, we had a flood, right? Well, we had a pandemic, so I don't have much to give him. But I mean, he really enjoyed that work. And I think the more we get some of them involved, not them and us and others, right? But the more we get some of the people with the heart and the money involved, I think that our community really, you know, we have, you know, board members that are, you know, all guns a-blazing, but they just want to know which way to point the gun. That's not a good analogy, but you know what I mean?
Absolutely, right? Like, you know, we know there are people in Nashville that want to help, that, you know, are good people and want to make an impact. And I think our community, you know, and I speak about like the COC, has two things that we're facing. Number one is lack of awareness of the broader community to, you know, homelessness reality in Nashville, the challenges that we face, and the progress that we're trying to make. I think there's a general lack of awareness in the broader community. And then the second is where there is awareness, lack of direction, right? People saying, hey, I believe in this, I'm passionate, what do you want me to do? And so I think that those are things that we can address in this goal number 4. And then the second point, thank you, April, for giving me that minute to remember what I wanted to talk about was, you know, I think some of that lack of awareness and lack of education in the broader community, and I may be making, you know, some more generalized statements, but this is just from my point of view, create issues like we saw with the council member who, you know, made a big stink and in a very inappropriate stink about housing that was being allocated in her community, right? But what people see are the posts that she made on Facebook, right? And the comments that she's making in her, you know, community meetings or what have you. And we as a community don't necessarily have a strong, cohesive story or a cohesive message to be able to share proactively with our broader Nashville stakeholders and community that would either offset, you know, where somebody could say, okay, you know, I hear you, but I actually know the context and let me also be a voice of reason here, or, you know, something that we could use to respond to that in a way that resonates with, you know, with people who might be afraid of, you know, having, you know, recently homeless individuals housed within their neighborhood, or, you know, being kind of, you know, we talked about, you know, the NIMBY, the not in my backyard situation quite a bit when we talked as a planning council. And I think that's another, this is another mechanism to really create that education and engagement of the broader community so that we can avoid, if possible, some of those unfortunate situations. So I'll just leave it there. I feel very passionate, clearly, about engagement, you know, and through, you know, communication and education and all that fun stuff, and the fact that we've probably got lots of opportunity within our broader Nashville community. And that's, that's what, the intention of this fourth goal was, to say, we've got our act together as a COC, and now let's make sure that we're bringing our broader city into the conversation. So I want to keep moving along. There's a timeline here that that was put together just to give the actions on the community plan and the goal a little bit more of a story to tell as well. The way that things were broken up from a prioritization and timing perspective were in this with this intention, which was really working on the foundation. So any action items that were around identifying inventory, really doubling down on data collection, governance and collaboration within the COC were identified as phase one and prioritized from an action item perspective in the plan. Phase two is truly about, taking those resources and starting to maximize that. And we talked about this in our committee chair meeting, and a lot of people identified, we're either kind of in phase one. Some committees have been able to start moving on to phase two, where we're really looking at that next step. Now we've got a little bit of a foundation. And then phase three of the plan is truly meant to position the community to start growing at scale, right? And so that was just the other thing that we reiterated in that committee chair meeting that I wanted to refresh our memories, because it's always helpful for me as well, is that this plan is really meant to be foundational, right? This is about, we're not doing anything super crazy, really innovative and inventive. This is about giving us the platform and a really strong foundation by which we can, drive real and sustainable change within our community and within our city. So that was just another way to look at the plan. And then now we're at the point where we can talk about the action items as assigned to the executive committee. But before we do that, once again, want to pause for any reflection, questions. Judy, is there anything I missed?
I would like to say something. This is great and this is awesome. My only problem of it is I've been here for these meetings. I know how these meetings go. I know the detail that everybody puts in these meetings. But we kind of need like a simpler booklet or something for people that really wants to get in a part of these meetings, so they can truly understand exactly what's going on in the community, when is it happening and stuff like that. This is a lot of information to kind of unveil on a person, especially a person on the outside looking in that's been waiting to hop in to be a part of this, to help out any way that they possibly can. And it's like a caseload being dropped on. It's like, well, kind of got to figure this out. So, like I said, for me, understandable. I've been here. I have been through a lot of meetings where I just sit back and just listen and absorb as much as possible. But I'm just like the people that's on the outside, where we don't have no connections, where we don't know about data. I know about data, but they don't know about data. They don't know exactly what policies that we're aiming at to tweak, to change, to work in our favor. So just want to let people know.
Hey, Alex, this is Susie. I don't think you're the only one. I mean, you're sort of looking in from the outside, but I think that there are staff and there are committee chairs who feel overwhelmed when they look at this as well. So, you know, I don't know whether it's time to kind of revisit the whole plan. There are definitely timelines that have not been met. There are some things that have worked well. There are some things that haven't worked so well. We've had a pandemic in the midst of things. You know, the reporting back from the chairs are burdened with a lot of activity, and they've taken this on as this sort of, you know, side hustle to their real jobs that they get paid for. So, you know, time is kind of hard to come by, especially when they're going through what they've gone through in the past week and the past year. So I don't know how this can be tackled more effectively by those chairs and staff, but it might be time to revisit this and sift through some of it to see if it can be, I don't know, if there can be a reality check somehow. Kind of highlight some things that really need to be, you know, focused on for the next year, and a few things that maybe need to be placed on a back burner. I don't know.
Thank you, Susie, for so nicely transitioning us to the first block of action items. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the executive committee items, or the items that were assigned to the executive committee, they truly are about, you know, governance and coordination. And the first theme, as you can see in these first 3 line items here, is around this governance and coordination of the strategic plan. Because we as a strategic planning committee did identify that, you know, this is a living, breathing document. We're going to learn things along the way, and we're going to have to put something in place to keep this work moving, right? We did all of the work to come up with the strategic plan and the items within the goals, and then the items that we needed addressed. And then we said, okay, so how do we activate this, right? How do we put this into play and make sure that we start working on all these things that we said we needed to accomplish? And so these first 3 line items are around activating the plan, keeping the plan front and foremost for everybody, and providing direction and providing ways for us to update the plan, pivot, you know, grow as we learn along the way. So I think, you know, Alex, you bring up a really good point. Susie, you bring up really good points. I mean, if I haven't looked at this plan in a hot minute, I'm overwhelmed by it, right? And so, you know, it is a lot. We're also a pretty big body with a lot of councils and stakeholders and people involved. And so this plan really does show all the moving parts that exist within our community. And it's just a lot to wrap your head around. So from our perspective, what was put on our to-do list was, so the first line item is about creating a strategic plan review and revision process. The objective here was truly to create a mechanism so that we could, you know, check in on progress on the plan, but also review and adjust the plan as we learned and experienced along the way. So this is technically in progress. In the beginning of last year, the executive committee approved a quarterly review process, and that is the process of the monthly reports that the committee chairs are asked to submit. The intention there, and we can review this in more detail. I think one of our action items is to pick up that process and take a look at it and make some, you know, adjustments. the executive committee reviewing those monthly reports, identifying what's on the agenda for the planning council to talk about. And then we had actually built a quarterly review by which, committees could request adjustments to the items on the plan, say, hey, we started working on this doesn't make a lot of sense. Or Elena, to your earlier point, as we've worked on this body of work, we realized that there's something else that we need to address. And so the intent was to have a mechanism for committees to bring that to the planning council and say, hey, is this what our community should be working on? If so, let's put it in the plan. If not, how do we pivot? And then we had also talked about making sure that on a yearly basis, we were looking at the strategic plan and making adjustments as needed. So I put a couple questions here in the fourth column to the right, just to help us think through, where does this action item stand today? How do we kind of re-kick off this process? What are the right next steps? What's our role as an executive committee in it? What is it that we need to do to say, okay, let's, here's our plan, and here's how we move forward with this action item, with the intent of making sure that we can help our committees and our stakeholders, know what they need to do, help them be successful, and ultimately help our planning council and our overall community be successful in achieving the goals of the strategic plan. So is, for example, an appropriate next step for us to maybe in our next meeting, take a look at the existing review and revision process that we wrote last year, and then either make adjustments or determine how we get that process back up and rolling?
I think that's probably a good direction to go.
Alex, please know that our silence means we're right there with you every time this conversation comes up. We're all just trying to take it in bit by bit. So you're not alone. And thank you so much, Laura, for all your hard work in this effort.
I wonder whether we could add to this, sort of like Laura's done a pretty intensive job at sort of reviewing kind of where we are in this plan, add to this like a half hour each executive committee meeting, having the key committees come in and go over sort of their progress, what they're up to, and then let them be a bit of the pulse to, like, okay, so what's working, what's not, what supports do they need maybe that they're not getting, what do they want to drop from the list? And that would be a great educational tool for me. Where are all the committees? And
I think this is Elena. I think that would be a great step just to find out, because I know just from our committee, I don't know if I'm communicating to this body, this executive body, like where we are, where our struggles might be. I think we put them in the reports, but then we're not really sure kind of what happens after that. So I think that would be great. And yeah, if it's just an invite to each committee chair to meet with us, that'd be great. And a little bit to Alex's point, I was wondering too, and again, I know no one has a lot of time, but how do we do a short version of this, and you know, where it's public facing, so that it's not as something a little more digestible, something more higher level. It's not creating anything, something new, but taking what's here and then making it for the public to easily digest.
Yeah, I think that'll be really important in this next block of, you know, the communication items, Elena. I think that's right along the kind of the path that we need to, you know, determine and take. So in the essence of time, because I'm looking at the time and we start at 8:30, so we end at 10. I'll take this item just to get you guys the current written process, and then prepare for next time we come together to review that process and determine next steps, just because I already have a pretty good grasp of it. And then hopefully we can, you know, we can really get that rocking and rolling. Like I said, you know, the intent of that step isn't to create a lot of extra work or bureaucracy. It's really about creating more visibility and a mechanism for people to have the support that they need to accomplish the goals of the strategic plan. So for you guys to keep that in mind, and then we can talk about, you know, how do we make that happen. Along the same lines in this kind of bucket is data reports on the strategic plan. So these two kind of go together. We had talked as a committee, a planning committee, about the need to be able to show the progress of the strategic plan and of the community, and do so in a way, you know, and I think this connects back to, you know, what we talked about with communication and et cetera as well, but do so in a way that you know, we can share out to community, to our stakeholders, like, hey, here's the progress that we're making, here's the journey that we're on, and you know, here's our little thermometer, like we are this far on our journey to, you know, fill up the thermometer. So the action that we need is, you know, first of all, to create a template for some kind of quarterly report that would pull the information from our monthly committee updates or anything else that shows us progress to the strategic plan. And then what Judy and I discovered was, you know, if we've got that quarterly data report figured out, then we can, you know, that will inform that next action item down, which is, you know, how do we present or deliver that to our other community partners, Metro Council, you know, our planning council, other members, et cetera. So I'll pause there for a second. I know, Judy, we said this was in progress, mostly because your team had been able to just pull some status last year, but it was very much an ad hoc effort. And I think what we'll probably need to do is figure something out that's less ad hoc and more sustainable. So I'm going to stop there for a second, see if anybody has any thoughts on next steps.
This is Elena again. I don't know if I have next thoughts, and this might be small, but I think I'm getting confused when it says create quarterly data reports. It's basically status reports, right? You're looking at progress towards meeting the goal, that the inventory found so and so many beds in this, right? So I think I get a little, just maybe because I'm part of the data committee and we're trying to create better data structures. So this is separate from the monthly reports we get from Judy and her group. So I don't know if anybody else was getting confused on that, but just something to think about. Maybe it was just me.
It's not just you, because I hear you, Elena, because sometimes I have a hard time keeping separate, right, the progress of the community, you know, that is what is included in the reports that are coming out from Judy's team, and the progress on the strategic plan. And I don't have a strong opinion with one way or the other because I think they are intermingled. I think we do need to share, you know, both community progress and progress on the strategic plan, because at the end of the day, we have to be able to keep an eye on, are we, you know, working the plan or not? And if we're not working the plan, what do we need to do? And hopefully be able to show the connection that the outcome of us working the plan are the outcomes that show up in the community report. I don't know if there's two completely separate entities. I don't feel like my brain works well enough to make them one entity, but I think there is a connection. And I certainly don't want people to feel like there's anything redundant, but there are two objectives there. So question for the group, does anybody feel passionate about kind of taking a stab at those two line items and just, you know, putting some thoughts together to bring back to the executive committee so we can have a more robust conversation around what is needed and, you know, where to go next?
Can you repeat that? Are you talking about the two bold action items in number 1 there?
These two, no, 2.5. And to be clear, I'm not necessarily asking somebody to sign up to do, you know, the full status report template, et cetera. What I'm asking is there anybody on the executive committee that would feel open to taking a lead on working through this as a committee to determine what, you know, what that looks like?
I would say I will. I think the difference would be, you know, am I going to other committees like the data committee or like Heather's report to gather the quarterly data and aggregating that? Is that what is expected, or?
I think that's part of the conversation, April, but I think that's exactly the questions that we need to bring forward. You know, so here's all the information that we have. We have, you know, committee monthly reports. We have, you know, Heather's reports. We have other information. What is it that we need to show to the Planning Council and show, you know, to other stakeholders in the community so that we can continue to drive forward the work of the plan and the work of the community? And then perhaps if you can kind of gather some of that and gather some of those questions, we can come back as a committee and take a look at that, and you kind of brainstorm or think it out, and then work toward creating that template. Does that sound doable?
Yeah.
If I may
Cool.
jump in real quickly on this one, this is really going back for me to what Alex said. Okay, what are we doing? Where are we with the strategic plan? How do we measure that? And it's the executive committee that needs to take that on. And then with goal 2.5, and how do we now present that to the community? So it's very clear, and so they can follow without having all the background that this any of the committees or the COC members have.
And Laura, this is Elena. April, I don't mind helping out either. I think I was a little hesitant just because of the data committee work and other work too, but I'm happy to kind of think through that a bit with you.
No make me hesitant because I was going straight to your committee for most of the information.
We're here to help.
Well, awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking that on. And I propose that we take at least a first pass at these 3 items as a committee the next time we get together. And I don't know if that's sooner than next month or if we just save it for next month. But I think we can probably, as a group, get through some of the details and decisions that we need to make so we can really move this forward. How do you guys feel as far as timing? I feel a sense of urgency, but I also feel a sense of reality with schedules. So you all let me know what feels right as far as moving this forward as a group. So our next meeting wouldn't be until May 3rd. Does that feel like the right amount of time to, work on a couple things offline and then get back together? Or do you all feel like maybe the week of the 19th or the 26th would be a good opportunity for us to at least start moving some stuff forward? That way, when we get together on the 5th, we can talk about what we need to put in front of the overall council.
I'll be honest and say that trying to schedule another meeting in between this one and the next one that we already have scheduled may be a little difficult. So looking to further this discussion at our next regular meeting. We tried to schedule a special meeting to have this discussion and ended up doing it on the regularly scheduled time. So I agree. I understand the sense of urgency, but I think giving folks time, particularly given this past week, would probably be the right thing to do. But that's just my thoughts. I will bow to the will.
I agree. I mean, again, not to keep going back to this, but a week after this, I have data committee and I have a prep meeting for that and then prep meeting for this. And so, if we can just see where we are at our next meeting, that would be great.
If that's the general consensus, I think that's totally fine. As long as we're, ready to go. So, April and Elena, as you guys think about this line item, Judy, I'm gonna volunteer your name. Judy has a lot of background in this space, but also look at me as a resource as it makes sense. I know we've got, sunshine laws and all that fun stuff. But I am more than happy to do anything to support, help clarify any questions, etc., so that we can get back together and kind of rock and roll through this first item. And then the homework that I'll give the group is just to look through these other items, especially the ones that are highlighted in yellow, because those are action items we were hoping to complete this year. I think all of this is doable. It'll be a divide and conquer approach, I think. And so the next time we get together, just be thinking about if some of these items are something that you feel passionate about and would like to drive forward with the executive committee. This second bucket we talked a lot about, and this is truly about the communication and engagement strategy within our COC, but with the broader community. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And know that all this stuff were just ideas, but not necessarily set in stone actions that need to be taken. So I think the step here is to determine what do we do to achieve that goal of engagement, communication, developing a story, etc. And then the next bucket here is around just making sure that our committees are that they have a clear objective, that they have work that is relevant to the work of the community, and they have the direction that they need. So this is an in progress item. There's just some additional leftover work around existing committees and collaborating with the charter committee to complete that review. And then everything else at the bottom of this list in this third bucket, I would just say, you know, take a look at it, know that these are action items on our list, but these are probably going to get pushed to 2022 because there's some dependencies that we haven't quite gotten to. So I know we're over time. Our next step when we get back together was to really knock this out and then identify, you know, owners and next steps for these two buckets. In the meantime, if there's something that you see here on this list that you have a question about or that you feel passionate about, or if there's anything that's missing that you feel like we as an executive committee should be, you know, taking on, you know, send that. I think it probably needs to be sent to Judy, but if you feel comfortable, you know, send it to me, or Judy can forward it on to me and we can, you know, work through the proper channels for email. Any questions, any final thoughts? I know this is a lot, and I do feel really confident that once we get rocking and rolling, it's not going to feel like, it's not going to feel as overwhelming as it feels right now. I think a lot of this, once we get movement, will fall into place with a little bit of direction and a little bit of focus. So I appreciate you guys leaning in, having the conversation and, you know, just working through this. And, you know, like I said, this is a living, breathing document. So the intent here is let's review, let's adjust, let's, you know, make this the right work for our community, because ultimately it's about ending homelessness and serving our, you know, our population here in Nashville. And so if at any point in time we feel like we are not doing that, let's make sure that we pivot accordingly.
This is Elena. Can I ask a quick question, Judy? How do I communicate with April on this? Am I allowed to work on
the
it?
best way is because it's a preparation thing. So if it's email, you can always send it through me. The key is it's not a any decision making or you know, discussion. That's the type. If it's a preparation that is deliberated in the executive committee, we can work around that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, Paula, I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, not much left to do. Laura, you've done a phenomenal job. I appreciate the way that you keep us on task with all of it. I know it is a lot, and we'll just keep plugging on. We are past our allotted time, but does anyone have anything pressing that we need to discuss before we end? All right, Judy, I know you got a lot going on this morning. I'm sure I'll be in touch. April, hang in there. And you guys, we really appreciate all your support, and don't forget all the folks that are working to take care of the folks that have been directly impacted in the flood. We'll keep you all posted and give you an update as soon as we have one. Anything else?
Thank you for all you do.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Elena.